We're here today with Tom Wilde, CEO of Indico. So Tom, let's begin by talking a bit about how Indico got started. I found it interesting when I was doing research for this interview that the company has been around since 2013, which is probably a bit earlier than I would have thought for a deep learning startup.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's funny when you map sort of this initial cohort of AI or deep learning startups, there seems to be a cluster that all formed around 2013-14 as sort of the initial wave of excitement around the technology. What I found is that there was a long span from that point where the commercial understanding of the technology and how to use it was really lacking, even though the technology was becoming quite mature and useful. And so the founders started the company out of some research they did at the Olin College of Engineering over in Needham.
And then, maybe we should note that you have been CEO for about a year or so, right?
Yeah, 9 months.
Right,
Yep.
You came in later and you are sort of, right, it's interesting that you are now CEO at a time when enterprises are starting, I guess, to realize the value of deep learning.
Right.
So how would you describe what Indico does in sort of like a sentence or two?
Sure. From a technical standpoint, we've solved one of the major blockers in enterprises trying to use deep learning and take advantage of all the great things and the great attributes that deep learning has, which is primarily you need a tremendous amount of training data to make deep learning work. And if you're Facebook or Google, that's fine, right? You have an immense amount of labeled training data. If you're a Fortune 500, you don't. You often have a small data problem. You have a small amount of high quality labeled data that you want to employ to solve a particular problem or task. So our innovation is solving that problem. We allow you to use deep learning with about 99% less training data than you would normally have to use.
So maybe related to that, we should probably talk about transfer learning. And can you explain what transfer learning is? Because I'm guessing that some of our viewers don't know what it is, and it's really key to what you do, right?
That's right. And all of this sort of alphabet soup of AI is a challenge. We can talk about that a little later in terms of how to help companies understand the landscape of AI. But transfer learning in particular is a branch of deep learning which is designed to take an understanding of a particular problem that you've trained on and use it to solve a problem to the left or the right of that one that you've identified. Now, the opportunity we saw was to sort of expand that to a ridiculous degree, right? What if you could build a generalized model that's so large that you could make it ready to solve almost any problem you threw at it with a very small amount of training data?
And I think what would probably also be helpful as sort of like foundational facts here, I found this statistic, which I believe is from your company's marketing materials, interesting. So talking about how much greater the amount of unstructured content in the enterprise there is relative to structured content. So I guess can you sort of talk about for this set of companies, whether it's Fortune 500 or not, kind of what data they tend to have and how much is structured versus unstructured and why that is?
Yeah, structured's been a huge area of investment in the last 20 years with a lot of success. So things like supply chain analysis and sales forecasting, and those are all structured data problems. The data is already labeled essentially because it lives in a row or a column in a database or a spreadsheet, most common ways to think about structured data.
Right.
Unstructured is this massive amount of primarily documents, but text of all kinds, customer support interactions, think about resumes and job descriptions, think about contracts, think about audits, compliance. All this lives within a document. And the problem is that all that value is sort of trapped in those documents. And there's risk and opportunity there that just hasn't been explored or leveraged yet because the technology just wasn't able to solve it until now.
And so when you talk about having this data available for the transfer learning, are you using publicly available data to train your algorithms or?
Yeah, that's right. So we spent the first 3 years of the company's life building up this massive generalized model by taking all the public data sets we could find that had labels with them. If you want to think about a simple example, IMDb, right? So you have a movie review and you have a score for that movie. So essentially you have a label to understand the sentiment of how people think about that movie. So we did that, times 10,000, right? And we're able to build up this huge vectorized representation of language that doesn't require us to be domain experts, right? We don't have to be insurance experts or medical experts or legal experts.
And so it would be sort of popular scenarios or use cases for your technology, and then extrapolating from that sort of for deep learning, transfer learning in general?
Yeah, generally it's fuzzy problems, right? So that's how we like to think about them, and that's what deep learning is really good at. So let me give you some examples of fuzzy problems. Matching a resume to a job description is a great one. If you think about resumes and job descriptions, they're really snowflakes. There aren't standardized, no two people describe the same job the same way. And so that sort of fuzzy intersection of how to try to map a resume to a job description is a classic deep learning problem. Another one would be trying to understand across thousands and thousands of customer interactions, what are they upset about? What are they happy about? You know, if you're an airline, right?
Sure.
What's causing problems? Can you use that intelligence to improve your product or your service? And then another one, which is popular, is anything to do with sort of contract analysis. So if you're an insurance company, you're in a highly regulated space. New regulations are issued by all 50 states all the time. And the big question is, how does this affect us? How does this affect these thousands of customer contracts we already have? So your ability to interpret that regulation and apply it to these existing contract language is another wonderful fuzzy problem that's actually very difficult.
And so are there particular sectors or industries that this is sort of best matched to? I mean, you mentioned airlines, insurance, or is it sort of more broadly?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to think about it. They're sort of industry specific. So if you think about insurance and financial services, both of those industries really run on documents. If you think about insurance in particular, insurance companies do nothing more than sell promises. That's what they're in the business to do.
Right.
And they capture those promises in the form of documents. So from an industry vertical, that's a very good one. From a sort of horizontal functional standpoint, the resume job description one is a really good one. Everyone has this problem.
Sure.
And it's a very good problem for deep learning.
Although I guess on the other hand, sort of what Indico's whole mission is, so making deep learning practical, accessible for businesses.
Right.
So in one sense, I guess your sort of stance would be that all businesses in all sectors should be learning deep learning or could benefit from
Yeah,
deep
certainly
learning.
all businesses, all sectors have unstructured content, and they all use that unstructured content to drive their business model in some fashion. And so understanding how you can take advantage of deep learning and then the applications and tools that we bring to the table along with the core technology innovation, we're trying to put that in their hands and allow them to leverage this technology the way that the giants do, the Microsofts and the Googles and the Facebooks.
Yeah, it's interesting that your platform, your enterprise AI platform, is meant to be accessible to a smaller, medium-sized business. And I found that
maybe not smaller, medium-sized, but just a non-data scientist,
Right.
I think is the way we think about it.
And it's sort of interesting to think of that from the, like you hear a lot, you read a lot of articles about the sort of crunch in terms of hiring data scientists, data engineers. And I was just wondering what you hear from clients, potential clients about, are they able to find that talent, or I guess the fact that it's difficult is one of the reasons why they're using your product. Right?
That's absolutely right. So I think 4 years ago, every company came to the conclusion that they were going to build a giant data science team, and that's how they were going to exploit machine learning. Turns out that's impossible. There just aren't enough data scientists out there. That may change, in the next 5 to 10 years as all of the schools have now begun to add that to their curriculum. But I think the reality is we find a lot of success when we help the business line manager or the subject matter expert, understand the capabilities of deep learning, and then B, how to use it and apply it without needing data science expertise. So we try to push the complexity down inside the platform so they don't have to go all the way up that learning curve in order to take advantage of it.
And do you think, is there a broader trend? It seems to me there is about, startups, companies trying to democratize AI or make accessible AI. Do you see that as a trend? It seems to me in the past few years it is.
For sure. And even the tech giants are working on similar themes for the same reason, that there aren't enough, sort of data scientists out there to craft these technology stacks from scratch. There's some problems that arise from that, which is, one of them is this notion of explainability. So with all the power of deep learning, one of the challenges is people view it as a black box often. And part of that's endemic to the technology itself. It works on neural networks, and part of a neural network is these hidden layers. And so by definition, you can't peer inside what's happening there. So we've invested a lot in explainability by allowing you to understand and sort of reverse engineer a prediction our platform's making by showing you the examples we trained on to do that. So you actually can you can sort of walk backwards and see how you got to that prediction.
Well, now, was that something that you added, that your company added sort of proactively, or was it in reaction to feedback from clients that they wanted the explainability?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. Because the founders at the company saw this as a frustration, they were able to project it onto the potential customers, and then for sure in the last year, it comes up all the time. And so, just at the Rework show here, we launched version 1 of our application platform. We've had our APIs and technology for a long time, but we've now completed the point-and-click version with this explainability built in because we had such strong demand for that.
Okay. Now, more generally speaking, what do you think, what sort of enterprise pain points is deep learning good at and still bad at, just from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think that maybe I'll answer it slightly differently. I think that what we find is people lack a framework for assessing that question. And so what we try to do is go in there and give them the building blocks for identifying use cases and what you need to then successfully execute with the use case. Deep learning is so capable across so many different things, it's hard to answer, where is it not good. I think where it falls down, where companies get frustrated or fail to capture ROI.
Right, or where is it less practical or
right,
whatever.
Is it's more of a business problem, to be honest. And so when we get into conversations with customers, a lot of times they're not starting with a business outcome. They're kind of focused on the technology and its capabilities and feature functionality. And we say, well, time out, let's not worry too much about that. Let's start with what is a valuable business outcome you're trying to drive here, and let us then help map backwards to, do you have enough labeled training data? Is there the involvement of a subject matter expert who actually understands the business problem you're trying to solve? Make sure it's not trying to be solved just by the data science department, which typically doesn't have enough exposure to the business problem. So there's a gap there that's opened up in the last few years because these companies have hired these big data science departments when they could. But they operate separately. So we're trying to bring them together and make these projects more successful.
So it typically is sort of like a cross-silo or interdisciplinary type team.
Right.
That is involved. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, bring them together so that there's a good business outcome defined. There's some degree of technical understanding of the data science side of it. That dramatically increases the probability of success for a project.
And I was going to ask you sort of what elements or building blocks do companies need to have in order to benefit from using deep learning tools such as your platform? I know we sort of touched on that before, but I guess you were saying that, companies have, pretty much any company would have some sort of data that you're able to work with, but.
That's right. They generally, we start with in one of two situations. One is they have a small amount of high quality labeled data. That's not uncommon. The good news with transfer learning, we can take advantage of just a small amount of labeled data and be successful with it. The other problem that emerged though is customers had data but not labeled data. And they would say, well, how do I create labeled data? And so part of the application we built is a very friendly point-and-click workflow tool where the data gets loaded in the application and a subject matter expert can sit down. If they know how to use Microsoft Word, they can use it. Underline a few sentences and tag those or annotate those. And as they do that, they're creating this labeled data and thus a custom model to use. So that was also a gap in the market, is because until now, what does it mean I need labeled data from you? That's not something that most people were doing as part of their day-to-day job.
Now I wish sort of in this video we could show one of your demos, because when I went, I appreciated both the sort of finding similar clothing items and also the Wikipedia. I don't know if there's any way you can sort of describe those demos in words. I kind of think they would be helpful to bring to life what Indico does.
Sure. I think one example, what we like to say, inside Indico is it's about the concepts, not the keywords, because for the last 20 or 30 years, and my background is 25 years in enterprise search, it's been all about the keywords. It's taxonomies and information librarians and rule-based systems. It's sort of the IBM Watson expert system approach, where you have to kind of parachute in all these people to build these elaborate rules to try to solve this problem. So what deep learning enables and what transfer learning enables is we focus on the concepts, because keywords shift, depending on the context in which they're used. So demos we do are things like, we have one fun one where you could type in the widening gap between wealth and inequality, and we give you all these examples of what we found using that sentence. And many of those examples don't use any of those keywords at all. But the concept and the sentiment is there embedded in these examples from these documents that we pull up. We also do work with images. I think images is becoming more of a solved problem. I would say our differentiators in image is less than text. I think we're very, very strong at text. We're state of the art in image, but there's images becoming more solved with deep learning. But there you can imagine, you just present 5 pictures of a certain type of women's shoe, and it will go out and find all those similarities, with very small training data, because it's featurizing what it's seeing in that picture, and thus being able to apply that to a large set of pictures.
Oh, okay. And when you say image, you include video in that?
Video in the sense that if you can snap frames from the video, you can use the same thing. I think there's another area of research around video that we're less focused on right now, but ultimately will be a good use case as well.
That's a lot of what I had wanted to ask you. I guess maybe we'll sum up by sort of talking about where you think you'll see the biggest impact for deep learning, transfer learning in general. That would probably be helpful to hear.
Yeah, I think that the labeled data problem is never going to go away with deep learning. So solving that, we viewed, at the company's inception as the most important, most valuable thing we could do, and we've done it really well. So I think that that opens up, a tremendously new market, much larger market to take advantage of this technology than it existed before. So I think that's a critical point. And then I think second, making it tangible. So we're now investing in a lot more sort of demo applications, so people can really understand the potential impact of this technology, specifically in the world we focus on, which is unstructured content, documents, and text.
Okay, great. And maybe just let people know where they can find more information about Indico.
Sure, we're at indico.io, so you can find everything you need there and reach out and contact us there.
Great, well, thanks very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth.